In this video, I want to talk about PIP and disabled people's ability, allowances. And I know that there are some people in society that cannot survive without some sort of funding, with someone without helping them pay their rent. There are some people that are so mentally ill that they cannot, they'd be homeless. If it weren't for someone helping them with their paying their rent, they will be homeless. Now, I want to say things from personal experience, because it's what's inspired me to say this. Is that I was watching a YouTube clip, and there was this disabled woman who's supposed to be the only disabled woman in the UK government with a missing arm or half a missing arm or something. But it actually angered me what she was saying, because she was fighting. I'm fighting for the rights of the disabled people of this country. There is 150,000 people that are about to go into poverty because of this cut. And I don't know, she was screaming like that. And I was just really angry. I was really angry. Why? Because I'm not disabled. I'm living in poverty. I do not have any money. I'm forcing myself to take clients, but I really hate it because of some of the things they say. And there's good and bad, but you get the bad in this job, and it makes me feel like I'm a god. I shouldn't be doing this. I've been helping so much with what I'm doing online, and I've been inspiring the whole timeline, and I have to do this. I hate it, but at the same time, I don't have any money if I don't do it. So I kind of feel like I need to. I'm not going to do much, but I'll see a couple of people, but. I am actually living in poverty, and then the only person who I know of who's definitely getting PIP is my sister, and I'm just angered about what she said versus her situation. Now, the cut is to cut people that have only got 3 points. My sister somehow, though, has got 4 points. I'm not really too sure how she's done this, because yes, she is autistic. I mean, it's when I say autistic, I mean she just has a social disorder, so she's not very good at really communicating that well, and often she just gives me one-word answers, or she says something that's so bland that I don't understand it, and often I misunderstand what she's saying because she says it in such a small sentence, and she doesn't seem to care. In fact, in anything, she seems to laugh at the fact that I don't understand the couple of words that she says, and then because she starts aggravating me, it's like I don't want to talk to her, but I'm trying to get information from her, and she's just refusing to give me as much information as possible. It's almost like she's enjoying pissing people off. I don't know what's wrong with her. I think she's stupid. I think she's a bit narcissistic. I don't think she really cares about her kids. I don't think she really cares about her family. Her mum has agreed to buy a flat out, and she's willing to take out a massive loan on it, so to help use that as a deposit to buy another house, and she doesn't care about the fact that she's lying to the banks about how she's going to rent this one-bedroom flat out when really she can't rent it out for another year, because also the kids use it, and she's just thinking, I don't really like that flat any longer, so I don't want it any longer. But the kids enjoy it, and the whole family enjoys it, and she just doesn't seem to. It's a narcissistic view, and there's lots of problems with her, but it's how she is, and it's a selfish attitude, and it's I just want more. Oh, I just want a big house. Well, we all want a big house, don't you understand that? And you can't just say I'm going to take out a £500,000 loan and quit my job and then expect the house to pay for itself, because you've got 3 houses to pay for. Don't you understand? And she just, she's stupid, and yet. She has been claiming PIP for the last 6 years. At the beginning, I understood, because George was working, he works in, I think, Deloitte and a bank, and he worked in a bank and then Deloitte. I don't know if that's the same thing or if they're 2 different companies, but it's Deloitte's a bank. But he was earning a lot of money, and he was paying a lot of tax, and he wasn't just paying for himself, he was also paying for her, because she was working, but it was kind of like under 12,000, and wasn't very much. It was like a 6-hour or 9-hour cleaning job. It wasn't very much, and so he was basically paying for her. And I think if someone is paying a huge amount of tax because they're in a high tax bracket, but they've also paying for a partner that can't work because she's not very skilled or not very bright, I think it is fine for the partner to start claiming PIP, and I think the amount they get should actually be dependent on how much their partner is paying. If their partner is earning £100,000 and is paying £20,000 a year for it, okay, it's all his money, and he's very rich, and he is going to give it to her. But at the same time, I think it's kind of fair that for her to be independent. So PIP is a personal independence claim, well, a personal independence payment. If she wants to claim PIP, I would see it as her, and get like 6,000 a year. I would see it as her just getting some of this 20,000, or actually it probably would have been more. It might have been 25,000 if you're paying. I don't know what it was, but she would have get a portion of that, because technically, if his earnings are actually spread over two people, then he's not really in the high tax bracket. Why? Because he's sort of subsidising for the work that she's not getting. So and this a PIP would something like that would help people who are earning. Like, I think also if your partner's earning a lot of money, you don't need to work. And therefore, why should you do a work is like £13 an hour as a cleaner when you don't need to? That motivation is always there, but at the same time you do still need some money, so you feel like I'm spending my own money, and I'm not too completely dependent on the partner, and therefore I think a PIP is something that can accommodate for that. But if a separation happens, then I don't think they do declare after the year has passed, after the tax year has passed. I think they shouldn't still continue claiming it. Okay, in my sister's case, the separation happened because she went through a mental breakdown. There was a house, because it was mostly empty because of COVID and not being able to, you have to do like a deep clean in between all of them, and I wasn't really wanting to do that, and I was happy to do it before because I felt like they were getting the work, they were bringing people in, and often they would come down every month, and also do a clean whenever they're down. So I felt like they were doing stuff in the first 2 years, but during that year I felt no motivation to do it because I only owned a quarter of the property, and there was two parties. People who booked the room for the house for one day and then just completely trashed it. That happened twice in that year, and there was one that we rented out for 6 weeks. But yeah, we didn't really get that much basically. So I probably lost about £1,000, and she probably lost about £4,000. So if she wanted to claim PIP based on her inability to work or inability to think, and want to to claim PIP because of this mental illness that she did lose out financially that year, so it makes sense. And then I guess the year after that, she went into a mental hospital twice. The second time though was much longer. She went in for like 3-4 months. And so again, if you want to claim PIP for something like that, sometimes people have hospital bill, or have not hospital bills because it's NHS, so it's all free. But if people have hospital appointments and they have to take time off work, and they have to say they have to have a lot of hospital appointments and they have to take a lot of time off work, it does add up, and they might even lose their job over it, and they might fall into financial debt, and I think whoever's testing whether or not someone deserves claims, it's a test that needs to be reviewed each year. You can't just say, okay, you're autistic, we'll give you £6,000 for the rest of your life. This is silly. This is ridiculous, because autism is just a social disorder, and I think it's very easy to exaggerate how bad someone's social ability is. My dad is autistic. He's way more autistic than my sister. I can barely get a word out of him. He grunts most of the time, and that's about it. And yeah, it's very frustrating trying to talk to him. But he's been in a full-time job for most of his life, and he can't not work because he likes working, he likes orders, he likes instructions. He feels like he has a life when he has a job, and therefore, yeah, just because you're autistic, that doesn't mean you. So I don't understand why autistic people are getting it, unless it's autistic with learning disorder. If it's a learning disorder, and you can't remember the ABCs or something, that's a severe learning disorder. So if I was to have a PIP situation, I would divide it into two. I would have the PIP, personal independence payment, and then I would have the personal disability allowance, personal disability allowance. Now the personal disability allowance can be much greater because this is a personal disability. My uncle is very bipolar, but I'm sure there's a spectrum of bipolar. That there's some people that have bipolar, and most of the time they're okay, and you don't know. And I think sometimes with bipolar, sometimes you can have like a couple of weeks, a couple of weeks breakdown. You can lose your mind, But then you can kind of recover after a couple of weeks, and maybe you will always live with it, and maybe you'll always make a couple of bad decisions or have the highs and lows, but it's on a mild level. And then you can have some people that are just so bipolar that they talk like this, and their hand or shakes. You know, if there's some people that are obviously mentally ill. You know, you don't need to do any. You don't need to have a conversation with my uncle to realise that he's mentally ill because of just how he shakes and how he stares and how he shakes. Sometimes he nods his head, or you know, he's very overweight as well, so he's not really, and he sleeps a lot. You know, so I would say that is more of a physical. I would say even though it is a bipolar, which is a mental condition, I would say it has turned into the physical. Why? Because it's turned into some sort of severe mental impairment. Now, how he's got this way, I do generally believe it's first of him not having a job, feeling depressed because of not having a job, and then having a mental breakdown, and then being fed a ton of drugs, and then them telling him he's sort of got bipolar, that he's never going to change, and then the doctors getting him into a sort of state of mind where he thinks he's useless, and this would have probably just exaggerated any bipolar feelings that he was having, and then with lithium, I suppose, I've heard is a really bad drug that kind of destroys your mind, but he's convinced that it's amazing because it gives you long life or something like that. I mean, I don't even know what he believes I don't believe what he believes is the truth, and therefore I can't trust it. But I don't know all the others, but he's been taking about 40 drugs a day for the last 20-30 years, and he's now got a very severe mental impairment, and you know, it's pretty bad. So I would say, even though it's bipolar is a mental condition, I think over the years of him not working and just doing nothing and getting worse and worse, but the doctor's thinking, oh, he's fine because he's shutting up and he's just sleeping, you know. If a mentally ill person is asleep, that doesn't mean they're recovering, and I feel like a lot of them, their drugs is just a tranquilizer, just to shut them up. Oh, we've shut them up. We're earning money, being a doctor, and I don't know, but I think these drugs have destroyed his life, and he now has a disability, a real physical disability, even though it just started off as a mental problem. It was a mental problem that got worse due to lots of drug abuse, not abuse of his choice, but doctors forcing it on him. And then now it's physical. It is a physical problem now, even though it's a mental bipolar is a mental problem. It is now a physical problem because it's obvious that he can't work. He can't do that. So I would have the two separations. One, which is the personal disability allowance, which will cover rent. So if you've got a property, or if you're renting a property, it has to be kind of a cheap property, a small budget property. So I wouldn't advise that these people live in London unless they have a specific reason, because London is a very expensive area, and if people want free housing, you shouldn't be expecting to get that in the most expensive areas, unless of course you have family that live in the area and if they need to visit. But yeah, if your family isn't close, if they don't even like you, if they don't really want to visit you, then it doesn't make sense. And if you're living off some sort of personal assistance or personal disabled allowance, then you shouldn't be allowed to live in expensive areas. That part of the deal should be that you are given some of the most cheapest places to live, because you're getting it all free. So but yeah, if you have a close family tie who are visiting and can't get out because they can't travel too far, then it's slightly different. But that's how I would have it. You would have one for severe cases, basically, and one for minor cases which could just be that you can't work, and your partner's earning a huge amount of tax, hence the sort of £6,000 a year is going to help cover that, unless of course they're only earning £40,000 a year, in which case you might not even deserve the 6,000. It might, because they're not paying that much tax, so it might be more like 4,000 that you get or something. And this is why it's personal because it shouldn't just be putting people in categories and boxes. It should be looking at the different types of illness, the different degrees of it, and I think there are plenty of people like my sister who definitely do need it, even though they're super rich. if they're having mental breakdowns and going in and out of hospitals and can't think properly, and there was a divorce coming up but she couldn't even think about it. I understand when she was mentally ill she didn't even want to think about it because she was mentally ill, and she was actually saying at the time that I don't even want any money, just leave it, forget about it, I don't care about it, I don't want the money. I mean, that's mentally ill. And then, but there was a change, and at some point she started to want the money, but she started to believe that if she waited longer and longer she would get more and more because he's earning more and more. That wasn't the case, because I was pretty sure that they had £1 million worth of stuff like a year before they got married, and yet for some reason 2 years after the divorce, they wanted divorce. She ended up with actually quite a bit less than half. But yeah, so and if he was working a lot in those 2 years that they were separated, I'm pretty sure he managed to hide quite a lot of money. But I don't care, because I do generally think that he earned it, and I don't think that if you're married to someone and you get a divorce, I don't think it should be split equally. No. I think if one person is the one who contributed all the money and all the wealth, then I do think that 35% is probably fair, and especially if the person with all the money is the one that's keeping the child. I think that is fair. If it would have been the other way around, if Sophie would have kept the child, then maybe it should be 50-50, because I would see kind of like 35 should go to the parent, and then 15 should go to the child, and maybe the father should also pay child support. But that's fair, and therefore, but yeah, so there was a point where Sophie was mentally ill, and it kind of became less when she met Marco again. She started copying and mimicking and being like him, and that's when the sort of mental illness became not noticeable again, and because it became not noticeable, I think this is about the point where she should stop claiming PIP. And yet, for some reason, she can, I think, still claim it, and I think she can still make the same claims, and then it's just like, why is she getting this? And then to think that disabled woman who believes that she's fighting for disabled rights, if you cut claim, there's going to be a lot of disabled people in poverty, and it's just, I'm just thinking of my sister. I'm just like, no, if you cut her claim, nothing will happen. She's not independent. She's not, if she, this money, the 6,000 that she's getting, it means absolutely nothing to her other than just, oh, I deserve it because I got it. That's all it is. She doesn't care that this is supposed to be a disabled person's allowance, and that she's not actually that mentally ill right now. Her degree of madness is now far less than it was a couple of years ago, hence she shouldn't now be claiming it. So why is she claiming it? I mean, she still can't look after a child, but I would say that that's more because of selfishness and lack of, she can't see dangers, and she's not right. But yeah, it just annoyed me to think that woman was trying to stop people from getting access to this money, when really based on the fact that they're going to be in poverty if they don't claim it, when that's just so not the case in my sister's case. If PIP was about getting people out of poverty, then why the hell are you giving it to my sister? Because she has never been in poverty. From the moment she's got that divorce in 2000, it was when COVID broke out. As soon as COVID broke out, that was when the child was born, and that was when the partner realised that she can't look after children because she just doesn't have the focus or the attention, or she kind of looks dirty. She looks down at the child and has dirty looks. Well, this is what I saw with her second child, and I can imagine her doing it with the first child, and I can imagine George being very horrified. Why are you looking at the child like that? Like it's a dirty thing or something, I don't know. And she was starting to have huge amounts of running thoughts going through her head, and you don't really know what she's thinking because she's a bit autistic. She doesn't really tell you, and it's just really hard to try and work out what she's saying. So I know she has problems, but if PIP is supposed to be about getting people out of poverty, then why the hell is she getting it? I support that people with disabilities who are literally in poverty, who are literally unable to pay their rent, or literally maybe able to pay their rent, but maybe they have lots of doctor's appointments and they keep losing a job because of not being able to attend, or not being able to get out of bed in the morning. There's a lot of people that might go through this, and they shouldn't be facing poverty. But at the same time, why is Sophie taking why is money being taken away from people who might actually be in poverty and then given to people like my sister? she's mentally ill, yeah, but she's not in poverty. She's got plenty of money, and you know. And so I definitely think something should change with it, and apparently they've cancelled that thing, and I'm just, it's a personal independence payment. So with some people, I think they deserve to have it cancelled, and with some people, they deserve not to have it cancelled. And I think there needs to be a better evaluation or a better test to work out who deserves it and who doesn't. So that's what I'm saying, and I think it's quite annoying how this clip that I watched that I lost. I can't post the link because I lost it. But she was saying a lot, but nothing was informational. Nothing told me what this new bill was. She was just going on about how much she hated this bill and how it was going to put people into poverty, but she didn't explain really what it was. I think I know what it is, which is just to cut claims for point systems. But she should have talked about the point systems and saying how the point systems are wrong. The point system, you should get points based on your financial situation. If you have no money in the account, if you have a high rent to pay and you don't, and you can't pay it, if you have a mortgage, a high mortgage to pay, or if you have kids, if kids are in a primary school or in a secondary school and you're paying £12,000 a year, my boarding school is £12,000 a year, but it'd be a lot more now because it's like 10 years later. So my boarding school would probably be about £25,000 a year. If you've got two kids in boarding school and you're having a high paid job, and then you suddenly have an accident and you have to take 6 months off, and you lose out on all that money, but all that money was actually needed to use to keep your kids in school and keep paying a mortgage. Maybe you have a big mansion that's worth a lot of money, but you have a huge mortgage on it, and you're going to fall behind in payments. If that's your case, then I think you should be able to claim PIP. Not necessarily disabled, because I would say the disabled one is more long term. If you have a car accident, you will probably take 6 months to recover, depending on how bad it is. It can take years, and you might have trauma or something for the rest of your life. But I would say, because it's only a short period, and you'll probably be recovered within the year. That's what PIP is more about. It's more about a sort of yearly recovery, a yearly assessment that where the person who gives you the money just calls you up, finds out if your circumstances are changed, takes out like notes about your circumstances. And I think there's also something that they should be allowed to look into the bank accounts of these people to make sure that they are telling the truth. If you've said that you haven't worked in 10 years and they go and look in your bank accounts and they see huge amounts of money, then they're going to be like, well, you obviously have worked because they've got huge amounts of money, and then you've caught them out on a lie. And if they're lying about that, what else are they lying about? I think if you're trying to claim these payment plans, then the payment people are allowed to go to the banks and find out what's in your bank account, and there shouldn't be laws that prevent this. Why? Because this is taxpayers' money that you're spending, and if you want to get access to it, you have to allow them to have access to your bank accounts. If you don't want to allow them to have access to your bank accounts, then you don't deserve PIP, because you obviously are not in poverty and you don't need it. And therefore, I would change the PIP system to make sure the checks are actually properly done, and that there is a yearly check to see how a person's mental state is, or even physical abilities. You could be really disabled one year, and then you could find that you get a prosthetic or something, and you find that actually your life goes back to normal. You could be deaf, and then you could get some sort of hearing aid, and then find that actually after a year that you're no longer a disabled person, even though you still have the hearing problem. With this sort of aid, this little battery thing that you put in your ear, whatever it is, you might find that you've actually adjusted, and you no longer see yourself as being disabled. So a disabled plan it shouldn't be for a long-term thing. It should be something personal, and both of the PIP and the disabled one should be reassessed. But you get the personal disabled allowance when you can't pay for your rent, and because you can't pay for your rent, I guess you must be far more severe. And if you're far more severe, then it's likely that you're still going to need it year after year after year. My uncle is getting worse and worse because of the drugs that he's being forced to take, and yeah, he's going to need it for the rest of his life. So this is sort of a lifetime disabled plan. But yeah, a lot of people that get disabled can heal themselves after a short time.